fast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to robot facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, where we challenge conventional wisdom and deliver the insights that matter most to dairy industry professionals. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most controversial topics shaping our industry right now. You've probably heard the narrative countless times at producer meetings and industry conferences. Illegal immigration killed the family dairy farm. But what if I told you that everything you've heard about this topic is completely backwards? What if the real story behind dairy's great consolidation has nothing to do with immigration and everything to do with cold, hard economics? In today's episode, we're examining the forces that have led to the loss of over 15,000 dairy farms in just 5 years, while milk production has actually increased. We'll explore why farms with 2,000 cows or more operate at nearly $10 per hundredweight less than their smaller counterparts, and why this cost gap, not labor policy, is the real driver of consolidation. This isn't about politics. This is about understanding the economic fundamentals that determine who survives and who gets consolidated in modern dairy farming. So grab your coffee and let's get into the data that's reshaping everything we thought we knew about our industry.
Welcome back to the Bullvine Podcast, the show that digs deep into the topics that matter to dairy producers.
That's right. Today, we're tackling a really interesting feature article from the Bullvine that's got everyone talking. We're going to break it all down.
This deep dive is all about dairy's great consolidation, beyond the blame game. It challenges a very common narrative you might have heard.
Indeed, the one that often blames immigration for the loss of family farms. It's a powerful, frequently repeated story when we see such rapid change in the industry.
But what does the data in this report actually reveal about that belief? Let's unpack this.
Okay, so the article immediately challenges that common narrative. You know, the one saying immigrant workers are destroying the dairy industry.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that one floating around.
But what's fascinating here is how the data from the Great Consolidation Report completely flips that script. It's counterintuitive for many, maybe, but the analysis shows immigrant workers are not destroying dairy. They are absolutely essential to its survival.
Essential is a strong word. The article highlights they produce, 79% of America's milk supply? Is that right?
Yes, 79%. It's the vast majority. And the economic modeling from Texas A&M paints a pretty dire picture if that workforce were to just disappear.
Right. It projects milk prices spiking by, 90.4%?
Yeah, 90.4%. And the entire industry losing about $32.1 billion.
Wow.
So it shows an industry that isn't being killed by immigration, but is, profoundly dependent on it just to function. This truly flips the script on the blame game.
Okay, so while we're clearing that up, we still have to face the raw numbers on farm loss because they're brutal. The USDA census data shows we lost 15,866 dairy farms just between 2017 and 2022.
Yeah.
That's more than 3 operations closing every single day.
These are tough numbers. And it's visible, right? You see those for sale signs where dairies used to be. But here's the twist. What happened to total milk production during that same time?
You'd think it would drop, wouldn't you, with all those farms closing?
Logically, yes.
But no, total milk production actually increased by 5%. It went from 215.5 billion pounds in 2017 up to 226.4 billion pounds in 2022. Fewer farms, more milk.
Fewer farms, more milk. That tells you very clearly that some operations have figured out how to operate at a massive scale. They've cracked the code on efficiency.
And the geography is fascinating too. Traditional states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New York, they saw significant farm losses. We're talking 2,740 in Wisconsin alone.
Right. Big numbers.
Pennsylvania lost 1,570. New York, 1,260. But then states like Texas, Idaho, and New Mexico are seeing significant investment in new facilities.
Big ones. Exactly. This isn't random. It's strategic capital following the most profitable opportunities. It's not about chasing cheaper labor primarily, but about pure economies of scale. As one banker friend quoted in the article put it, the middle is disappearing. You're either getting really big or you're getting out.
Getting big or getting out.
Yeah. And the USDA census data backs this up with a huge structural shift. Farms with under 100 cows, down 42%.
42%.
Then 499 cows, down 33.6%. Even the 500 and 999 cow farms saw a 35.1% drop, and the 2,499 cow farms were down 10%.
So losses across almost all size categories.
But, and here's the kicker, farms with 2,500 cows or more actually grew. They grew by 16.8%, going from 714 farms to 834.
Okay.
And now, those 2,500 plus cow operations produce 46% of all U.S. milk. Almost half.
That data just lays bare the starkness of this fundamental restructuring. It feels like a profound and pretty aggressive transformation.
It really is.
So we've debunked the immigration myths. We've seen the numbers on farm loss and production. What's the real economic engine behind this consolidation? What does the report say is the core driver?
That's the critical question, right? And the USDA Economic Research Service analysis on production costs is incredibly revealing here.
What did they find? What are the numbers?
Well, they found that farms with 2,000 plus cows averaged $23.06 per hundredweight in production costs.
Okay, $23.06 for the big guys.
Right. Now compare that to farms with 199 cows. Their costs, $32.83 per hundredweight.
Wow, that's nearly a $10 per hundredweight difference.
A huge competitive gap, almost $10.
In real-world terms, just thinking about a 150 cow operation, that means about a $27,000 a year disadvantage compared to their larger neighbors.
Yeah, or $135,000 over 5 years. It adds up fast.
And that has nothing to do with labor costs, right? This isn't about wages.
Absolutely nothing. This is purely operational economics. But here's the real eye-opener, Sarah. When you dig into the non-feed costs, equipment, repairs, utilities, capital, compliance, the difference is staggering.
Yeah.
While the difference in feed costs was about $2.50 per hundredweight between those groups.
Right.
The gap in non-feed expenses was a staggering $19.59 per hundredweight.
$19.59. Almost $20. That's almost 8 times the difference compared to feed costs. Why is that so critical?
It's critical because for smaller herds, those under 1,000 cows, those non-feed costs actually exceed their feed costs.
More than feed.
Yeah. All those fixed expenses, the barn, the parlor, the machinery, they get spread across much, much larger volumes on the mega-dairies, diluting the cost per unit.
Right, okay. Makes sense.
So their biggest expense pressure isn't what goes into the cow, it's everything else around it. This is a structural disadvantage. As Dr. Mark Stevenson at the University of Wisconsin puts it, the economics are pretty unforgiving.
Unforgiving.
He says, when your fixed costs are higher than your variable costs, you're in a structurally disadvantaged position in a commodity market.
That really paints a tough picture. A structurally disadvantaged position.
It does. It makes it incredibly hard to compete on price alone if you're not at scale.
Let's circle back to labor then, but reframing it, like we discussed, as an essential force, not the problem. What's the reality of dairy labor today, according to the article?
Well, it's interesting. Immigrant workers make up 51% of the total dairy workforce.
About half.
Right. But critically, they produce 79% of the nation's milk supply.
79%. So that tells you they're disproportionately on the larger, more productive farms.
Exactly. And the article stresses this isn't really about suppressing wages. It's about availability and willingness. There's a story about one Vermont farmer.
Yeah.
Received only 2 applications from native-born workers in 20 years. 2. Compared to 150 immigrants who applied.
2 versus 150. That says a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. And wages have also gone up substantially. The median advertised wage for meat and dairy workers jumped, 33.7% between 2019 and 2022?
Yeah, far faster than the national median. So labor is now a pretty big chunk of costs, 18% to 25% of total operating costs, the article says.
Definitely not cheap labor anymore, if it ever truly was. But the real problem, the real Achilles heel here is the legal status and the uncertainty around it.
Oh, so?
Well, the H-2A guest worker program, it's designed for seasonal work, like picking apples or harvesting vegetables.
Right, not year-round dairy.
Exactly. Dairy farming is 365 days a year. That Texas A&M study from 2015, the one modeling the loss of this workforce, it's alarming.
What were those projections again?
2.1 million fewer dairy cows, 48.4 billion pounds less milk, and over 7,000 dairy farms forced to close. Just gone.
That's catastrophic.
And even if you only had a 50% reduction in that workforce, it would still spike milk prices 45.2% and cost the economy $16 billion.
Wow.
There's a quote from a large-scale producer in Idaho, very blunt. He said, "If this workforce vanished tomorrow, we'd have dead cows within 48 hours because there's literally nobody else to milk them."
Dead cows within 48 hours. That puts a fine point on the severity, doesn't it?
It really does. It highlights the vulnerability.
Okay, what about technology? How does that fit into the consolidation picture? We hear a lot about robots.
Yeah, it's what researchers call the technological treadmill. You have to keep adopting new tech just to stay competitive. Take Delaval VMS robotic milking systems, great tech.
But expensive, right?
Very. Over $200,000 per unit. But they can slash direct milking labor by up to 60%. So these efficiency gains come with huge capital requirements.
Which means primarily bigger operations can afford them.
Precisely. They often use technology to optimize productivity, maybe not necessarily replace immigrant workers entirely, but certainly to manage more cows with the same or fewer people.
So only well-capitalized operations can really afford these big investments, which just widens that competitive gap we talked about.
Exactly.
What else is driving this? The article mentioned something called processor pull.
Yes, that's another huge factor. There's been massive consolidation downstream too, not just at the farm level.
How much consolidation are we talking?
Just 3 major cooperatives, Dairy Farmers of America, Land O'Lakes, California Dairies. They now handle over 80% of the nation's milk marketing.
80%, just 3 co-ops.
Yeah, and these big processors, they're building these new, huge plants. Efficient, but they need massive, consistent volumes of milk to run properly.
Makes sense.
There's a quote from a DFA representative who basically admitted, "We're building plants that need 4 to 5 million pounds per day. We can't deal with 200 small farms. We need 10 large ones."
10 large ones instead of 200 small ones. That creates powerful incentives for consolidation right at the farm level, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If your processor needs huge volumes, you either get huge or you risk losing your market.
It's interesting to compare this to how other major dairy countries handle these kinds of pressures. Are we unique?
We kind of are. Canada has supply management, right? New Zealand has its strong cooperative processing model with Fonterra. The EU provides a lot more direct support. Denmark and the Netherlands are investing heavily in automation and environmental tech.
So our approach, relying heavily on immigrant labor, but with all this policy uncertainty.
Yeah, it's unique among developed dairy economies and, you could argue, maybe more risky long term.
And the environmental sustainability angle, too. How does that play in it?
It's increasingly important. Large-scale operations might have advantages with things like advanced manure management or energy efficiency tech, just because they can spread those big investment costs over more cows.
Right. Economies of scale again.
But then again, there's also this growing consumer demand for sustainable products, which often favors smaller, maybe more transparent operations or creates niche markets. Plus, climate change itself, heat stress, extreme weather that test resilience in ways that might favor larger operations with better infrastructure, it's complex.
It definitely sounds like a lot of interlocking pressures. So, after digging through all that information, what's the key takeaway for a farmer listening today? How can they actually apply this knowledge from the article to their own operation?
Yeah, that's the crucial part. And the article does a good job breaking down some clear action insights based on operation size. It recognizes it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Okay, let's start with the smaller guys, maybe 100, 500 cows. What's the immediate advice for them?
For that 100, 500 cow group, the advice is really immediate focus on maximizing milk quality premiums. There's often money left on the table there.
Good point.
Then explore value-added opportunities and do it within the next 18 months, not thinking 5 years down the road. Things are moving too fast.
Value added like what? Direct marketing? Jeez.
Could be. Or consider cooperative processing partnerships to gain some scale benefits. And importantly, seriously evaluate the economics of an organic transition.
Organic. Why specifically organic?
Well, the article mentions a 300-cow Vermont operation that transitioned. They were getting $45 per hundredweight.
$45.
Yeah. While their conventional neighbors were struggling down at $21, the math can be pretty compelling depending on your situation.
That's a massive difference. Okay, what about that middle ground, maybe 500, 2,000 cow operations? The article called that the challenging middle.
Yes, the challenging middle ground. For them, the advice is selective automation. Focus on feeding and monitoring systems first. That often gives the biggest bang for your buck initially.
Okay, selective automation. What else?
Strengthen your processor relationships now.
Right.
While you still have options, solidify those connections. Carefully weigh geographic expansion versus intensifying locally. That depends a lot on land costs and local resources. And, crucially, develop immigration compliance programs immediately. Don't wait.
Get ahead of the uncertainty there. Makes sense. And for the big players, the 2,000-plus cow operations, what's the advice to stay ahead? They seem to be winning, but they can't rest, right?
Absolutely not. For them, it's accelerate technology adoption across all systems: milking, feeding, management, data analysis. Diversify processing relationships to reduce risk. Don't become dependent on just one buyer, even at that scale.
Good point.
Invest heavily in labor retention programs because turnover is incredibly costly when you're that big. And seriously consider vertical integration opportunities, controlling more of your supply chain to manage risk.
Looking ahead then, the article paints this picture of the industry not just consolidating, but really splitting.
Exactly. It projects this continued bifurcation, this split into two distinct businesses. On one hand, you'll have these high-volume, tech-heavy, professionally managed operations, almost like manufacturing milk.
Milk factories, basically.
In a sense, yeah. And on the other hand, you'll have value-added, locally focused, relationship-based operations, more like artisanal production, focusing on a specific consumer.
And that middle ground just gets squeezed harder and harder.
It becomes increasingly untenable. And again, not because of immigration, but because of those fundamental economics of scale and that heavy fixed cost burden for smaller operations.
So the core message we've pulled out of this deep dive is pretty clear. Immigrant workers didn't kill the traditional American dairy farm. If anything, they've been keeping the lights on.
Absolutely. Keeping the lights on while these powerful economic forces are really determining who survives consolidation.
And the real threat isn't their presence. It's the profound economic and operational risk if that essential workforce were suddenly removed. That's the vulnerability.
That's the key vulnerability, and maybe the one that needs more focus.
It really does shift the whole perspective, doesn't it? So the question for you listening isn't if consolidation will continue.
No, that seems pretty certain. It's whether you'll be a consolidator or get consolidated. That's the blunt reality the article lays bare. The story of dairy's future is going to be about adaptation, not blame.
So we really encourage you to reflect on your own operation in light of this. How have your cost structure changed? Are you seeing these non-feed costs rise? What are the real labor challenges you're facing? And what are sustainable solutions? What tech investments actually make sense for you? And how are you preparing for continued consolidation in your area? These aren't easy questions for sure.
No, definitely not.
But they're definitely the right ones to be asking right now.
Great points. And that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. For more articles and insights, be sure to visit www.thebullvine.com.
Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
That wraps up another episode of the Bullvine Podcast. If today's discussion challenged some of your assumptions about what's really driving change in our industry, that's exactly what we're here for. The data doesn't lie, and the producers who understand these economic realities are the ones positioning themselves to write the next chapter of American dairy farming. Remember, while everyone else is fighting yesterday's battles, the smart money is already preparing for tomorrow's opportunities. The question isn't whether consolidation will continue, it's whether you'll be a consolidator or get consolidated. Want to dive deeper into this analysis? Head over to www.thebullvine.com, where you'll find the full article, complete with tables, data sources, and practical strategies for different operation sizes. And don't forget to subscribe to the Bullvine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, because the future of dairy farming won't be determined by who we blame for the past, but by who's smart enough to adapt to what's actually happening. This has been the Bullvine Podcast. Keep challenging conventional wisdom, keep asking the tough questions, and keep building the future of dairy. We'll see you next time.